Trusting God when He doesn't answer your prayer. Most of us can probably think of a time when we asked God for something and He didn't answer our prayer the way we wanted. With a little distance, sometimes we can see how God was protecting us. Other times, it just feels unfair, confusing, or painful. In those moments, we have two options. We can either choose to trust God, or not. The Bible is full of stories about people who chose to trust God, even when things didn't go their way. For example, Daniel was taken from his home in Jerusalem and forced into Babylonian captivity. Through all the fear and uncertainty he must have felt, he continued to pray 3 times a day, just as he'd done before. We don't know what he prayed for, but it's probably safe to guess that Daniel asked God to rescue the Israelites and return them to their homeland. Yet, the Israelites were held captive for 70 years. Instead of freedom, Daniel served a foreign king for most of his life and was even thrown in the lion's den for worshiping God. Daniel could have easily been discouraged by his circumstances and turned from God. But after several years of praying consistently, Daniel would have known God intimately. He would have seen God's goodness and grace throughout his life. He would have been able to point to countless times God gave him strength, poured out wisdom, and performed miracles. And because of God's faithfulness in his past, Daniel would have known that he could also trust God with his future. Scripture tells us that God's ways are higher than ours, and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. There are countless reasons why it may seem like your prayers go unanswered. Maybe God has something better for you, or he's protecting you. Maybe he needs you to grow, or the timing just isn't right. Maybe it isn't even about you. Daniel had no way of knowing that his story would be told centuries later or that God would use his circumstances to strengthen our faith. Whether you ever know it or not, God will use your story to impact the lives of people around you. There may even be ripple effects that impact and encourage people you'll never meet. Maybe you've lived a difficult life and it's hard to see God's faithfulness in your story. If so, look to the stories in the Bible like Daniel's to find hope, comfort, and reassurance. Daniel's God is your God too, and he hasn't changed. He still does miracles, he still lends us his strength, and he still saves. Anytime you feel unsure about God's direction for your life, look to Scripture and focus on what you know to be true. God is loving, kind, and merciful. He loves to give you good gifts. He has a plan and a purpose for your life. He will use everything that happens to you for your good. He loves you deeply and was willing to sacrifice greatly to be with you. A love like that is worthy of your trust. You may be going through one of the hardest times of your life. Maybe you're healing from a failed marriage, struggling with infertility, or grieving the loss of a loved one. Maybe you're upset that life hasn't turned out the way you expected. No matter what you're going through right now, you can trust God with your heart. Bring him your heartache, your frustration, and your unease. He can take it all, and he wants to hear it all. Instead of allowing it to pull you away from God, let it draw you closer to him.
Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day, and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. For the Lord Jehovah is my strength and my song. He also is become my salvation. Who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, and was heard in that he feared. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose, is an everlasting kingdom, and thy dominion endureth throughout all generations. Thou tellest my wanderings. Put thou my tears into thy bottle. Are they not in thy book? When I cry unto thee, then shall mine enemies turn back. This I know, for God is for me. In God will I praise his word, in the Lord will I praise his word. In God have I put my trust. I will not be afraid what man can do unto me.